and the people here in St. Louis at the St. Louis University Museum of Art. Of course, we want to start with some thank yous. First and foremost to Petruta Lipan, the executive director of the museum. I see Caitlin Stam, who just came in, who's an associate dean in our libraries, and the new Center for Bosnian Studies, which is relocated to St. Louis University, is under her direction. So thank you to Caitlin for being here. Sam Dieljor and Jonathan Harms are the reason that you can see and hear us now with their excellent technology support. For the people who are online, except for Doug and Amila, we'll ask while we're doing the first part of the program to just have you stay muted. We are recording the program to share later with people who can't be here. And again, and Carson, too, thank you to you, also from the museum staff. We have three very distinguished speakers tonight. I'm Patrick McCarthy. I'm Associate Dean of Libraries at St. Louis University, and I'll be serving as the moderator for the program tonight. Adna Karamehich Oates, due to a family situation, needed to return to Bosnia and was originally slated to be the moderator for the program tonight. So I'm a poor substitute for Adna, but you'll bear with me, I know. So I wanted to start with some introductions, the first of which is Dr. Amila Buturovic, who is a professor at York University in Toronto. Her field of research includes the intertwining of religion and culture, especially in the context of Islamic societies. She is the author of Stone Speaker, Medieval Tombstones, Landscape, and Bosnian Identity in the Poetry of Mak Dizdar. She's also the author of Carved in Stone, Etched in Memory, Death, Tombstones, and Commemoration in Bosnian Islam since 1500, and the collection Women in the Ottoman Balkans, Gender, Culture, and History, for which she was the co-editor with Irvin Schick. Amila's sister, Aida, lost her life in 1992 after trying to save the contents of the National Library of Sarajevo. And Aida's death became a symbol of the war's deliberate assault on culture and knowledge, and her life is a testament to courage and intellectual resistance. Aida's story is told in part in the exhibit on the Bosnian Student Project in a section that is entitled A Life Lost Defending Culture. And Aida's memory was the inspiration for tonight's program. So welcome, Amila, and a very warm welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so very much, and thank you for organizing this.
Thank you, you're welcome. Doug Hostetter is the co-founder with the late Tosin Bayrak of the Bosnian Student Project, a wartime effort to save Bosnian students trapped in war zones and to bring them to American colleges and universities. The national project rescued more than 160 students, including students who were given refuge here at St. Louis University. As a Mennonite, Doug was a conscientious objector during the Vietnam War, but served in the middle of the war zone supporting the Vietnamese people. Doug's experience in Vietnam established his path working for peace throughout the world, from Nicaragua during the Contra War, in Iraq with attempts to prevent the first Gulf War by trading a plane full of medicine with the Iraqis for US citizens and UN hostages, and his work to save Bosnian students from genocide in the 1990s. Doug, welcome to you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And finally, Lejla Susic was a participant in the Bosnian Student Project. During the war, Lejla and her family were driven from their home in the Herzegovinian city of Mostar. Lejla was one of the organizers of the Wartime Association of Bosnian Students in Croatia, and Lejla received a scholarship to attend Iona College in New York. Lejla earned her master's degree in international relations at Webster University in St. Louis, where she moved when her parents were resettled here as refugees. Lejla led the efforts for the reunion event for the Bosnian Student Project, of which the exhibit is an outgrowth. In 2000, Lejla served as the interpreter and translator for After the Fall, Srebrenica Survivors in St. Louis, a companion volume to an exhibit at the Missouri History Museum that was viewed by an audience of more than 50,000 people. Lejla and her husband Ricky have 2 sons. I had the honor of being the best man at Lejla's wedding. And Lejla is employed here in St. Louis at an institution where she has worked for more than 20 years. So welcome, Lejla.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here.
Thank you. Just to set the stage briefly for tonight's discussion, we'll show in a moment a short video about the intentional destruction of the National Library in Sarajevo. But to pull the lens of interpretation back a little bit more, Sarajevo is the capital city of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It is and was an urban synthesis of multi-ethnicity, religious tolerance, and respect for neighbors, regardless of their identity. It created a spirit and a way of life that was more than just the sum of its parts. The city and its people embraced mutuality and interdependence, which undermined the separatist war aims of the nationalists. So the aggressors sought to destroy Sarajevo and the emblems of the culture that sustained it, including the National Library. So we'll view now just a short video about the destruction of the National Library.
People are attached to their environment, first of all. Secondly, they're attached to specific objects in their own environment. If you take a building like Vijećnica, the National University Library in Sarajevo, people are not attached to it because they know the name of the architect or they admire it aesthetically. They're attached to it because they had rendezvous with their girlfriend in front of it. Maybe they spent very good hours reading books in it. It's a landmark. It's something that is part of their lives.
The National Library is in the center of the old town in Sarajevo, at the bottom of the valley. It's located in the former Austro-Hungarian Yard City Hall and therefore still referred to as the Vijećnica Town Hall by Sarajevans. It had been the National Library since World War II and was to Bosnia what the British Library is in respect to Britain. It was the library of record. On the 25th of August, shortly after nightfall, it was bombarded from multiple locations from the Bosnian Serb army lines overlooking Sarajevo. Eyewitnesses described that it was hit by more than 40 incendiary shells, which caused intense fire.
Prije nego što se zapala riječnica na jedno 2-3 sata, agresor je zatvorio sve ventile, u Sarajevu nikad nije bilo vode.
Hoje esse tipo de exercício da luta o puxar sua caça na rua, se representação de uma chama do ano novo, todos para não vai surgir mais que o grosso segundo grupo desta conversa.
The building burned for nearly 3 days, and close to 90% of the collection was destroyed.
What quantity of books were destroyed in the fire?
The estimate is close to 1.5 million volumes.
Então, os números, cartões que eu pude, os nossos números, os que eu pude, e eu disse que pude, eu não tinha dado. Eu da cidade da tarde, hoje não é me deixa de noite. Vamos só a noite, eu vou deixar menino, no chinês, no chinês.
This is the day after the shelling. This is the interior of the National Library. You can see the place is intense. You can see pages of books dancing in the flames.
Kad je nacionalna biblioteka izborila, to je bio veliki šok. A kada su još izborili orijentalni institut i nekoliko, osim nacionalne biblioteke, nekoliko posebnih historijskih spomenika Sarajeva, to je za Sarajevo, tada je nastala riječ urbicid, dakle ubijanje grada, ubijanje spomenika kao kovanica izvedena iz ranije poznate riječi genocid.
The destruction of the Institute of Oriental Studies in Sarajevo, which according to numerous eyewitness reports, was shelled and burned on the night of 17 May 1992, was probably the single largest loss of archival materials in Bosnia. The Institute of Oriental Studies held the former Ottoman provincial archives with more than 200,000 documents, and the country's richest collection of Islamic manuscripts, the record of more than 500 years of Bosnian Muslim cultural history.
Složili biste se da nacionalna biblioteka u Sarajevu nije islamski objekt, je li tako?
No, but it is a cultural monument.
Da li ste čuli da su nju zapalili u stvari muslimanski, pripadnici muslimanske paravojske ili Ćelini borci?
For my first expert report for the tribunal, I investigated as much as I could first-hand accounts, including those of people who were in the building at the time, journalists, firefighters. I presented the same material before the International Court of Justice, which one of its very few original findings of fact concluded that the library was destroyed as a result of an attack by Serb forces. You can refer to the ICJ's judgment for the relevant paragraphs.
So I'll open the program with a fairly broad question for any of our three panelists. And for those who are less familiar with the Bosnian context, if you could just talk about why this work matters. Why is it important to remember these events?
I could talk a bit about the Bosnian Student Project, which was begun in 1993 while the war was at its height. And it was intentionally to try to bring together Americans of all ethnicities and religious backgrounds to try to rescue Bosnians who were no longer able to continue their education in Bosnia because of their ethnicity. And we thought if a genocide is basically trying to designate a people and label them as non-human and beyond the pale, the antidote of that is to embrace them and to basically welcome them into our homes and schools. So our challenge to American universities was, if you do not believe that people should be killed or displaced from their homes because of their ethnicity or their religion, would you be willing to give a scholarship to a qualified Bosnian student who could no longer continue their education in Bosnia because of their ethnicity or their religion? And at that time, back in the mid-1990s, that resonated with a lot of Americans. A lot of Americans believed that we were a country that did believe that everyone, regardless of their ethnic or religious background, had their own human dignity and were worthy of respect and welcome in our communities. Now, there are forces today in American society that are trying to drive in the opposite direction. But in the early 1990s, we had many universities, over 100 universities that were willing to open their universities to students who had been denied their privilege to continue their education in their own country because of their ethnicity. And it was a win-win for everybody. The amazing thing about the project is it changed all of us. I welcomed 2 Bosnian Muslim graduate students into my home during the war. And my own young sons were in middle school and elementary school, and they both bonded with these older Bosnian young men, went to their graduations and saw them as part of our family. They grew up knowing that they had Bosnian Muslim older brothers, and it changed them. And they young men who lived in our home are still part of our family in many ways. They've also gone off to other countries and jobs in other places, but we still keep in touch with each other, and all of our lives have been changed in positive ways because of that experience.
That's great, Doug. Thank you. Lejla or Amila, anything that you want to add?
Well, please,
Go ahead.
Lejla, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
No, you have priority. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of sort of contextual notes to the film that we just saw, to the little video that we just saw, and to what just Doug talked about, and to something that I think concerns us all, and that is how to run away and how to fight against this notion that we, as human beings belonging to a particular culture, need to strive for some kind of purity, cultural purity, and how actually dangerous that is in a world in which historically the whole idea runs against the grain of history. That cultures are never pure. Cultures are systems that constantly come into contact with each other, and whether that is expressed through food, through language, through customs, through worldviews, through travel, it doesn't really, it just adds to these complexities which allow us to, in fact, exist in the world in a more enlightened way, as it were, aware of each other and become part of sort of connected humanity rather than cultural exclusivity. And what this film just showed us, and what the war in Bosnia showed us, is that the importance, the design that goes into the removal of people, that is not just about biological destruction of people. It's not just about killing people. It's about erasing their memory. It's about erasing their relationship to space. It's in that sense about erasing their sort of kinesthetic sense of where they are and how. So the markers to which they are used to as a cultural group are no longer there. So they have nothing to refer themselves to, historically speaking, culturally speaking. And that is an extremely powerful weapon of genocide, of erasure, of changing, rewriting history so as to, first and foremost, so as to rewrite the future as well. So it is not just about saying, this library never existed. It's about indicating that in the future generations will have no library to go to that will connect them to the past, that will connect them to themselves in historical terms, in these kinds of mixed terms, that will create a whole new set of parameters which will be exclusive rather than inclusive. And that, I think, is something that we need to be always aware of any kind of a claim to purity, that it will inevitably go in this direction of either destruction of monuments, destruction of libraries, destruction of any kind of marker that allows people to be what they are in space and in time. So that's something that I have been, not just because I mean, I'm a cultural historian, and in some ways my academic self-making, if you wish, where it did come in response to what was going on to Bosnia, even though I had already started I was just finishing my graduate degree in Montreal when the war began. But these personal losses, this sense of erasure that I felt from Montreal, and from not even having to be in Sarajevo, I just felt suddenly like a balloon, floating disconnected somehow from the space from which I could call home, and which I knew was was, a thorn in the eye of nationalists, purist nationalists that orchestrated the ethnic cleansing and genocide in Bosnia. And that I see something that is repeated, as we speak in so many parts of the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think these emblems or symbols of a shared life in the kind of war that occurred in Bosnia and Herzegovina, those had to be destroyed because they were the visible, tangible evidence of a common life. And Lejla, did you want to add anything?
Yes, when I was watching this video, for me, it was kind of very personal because I was a student at the University of Sarajevo at that time. I did flee right before the siege of Sarajevo, and that building, along with other landmarks, was just a very beautiful, symbolic part of the city. And watching that burn was like part of me was burning. It was like the city is just appearing in front of my eyes, just watching that. It kind of reminded me of those days, of the days that we would meet right in front of the building or at the entrance of the building, or the train would stop. You just get up there, meet your friends, and suddenly that part is gone. It's just burned to the ashes, and the books and everything, the history, it was like the whole country was being wiped off just by burning the library that contained the history. So it was really hard to watch that again, to remember those moments. But yeah, that's what came to me when I was watching that.
And I think in the same way, the destruction of the old bridge in Mostar was a shared symbol of unity, of connection among people. Do you remember where you were when that occurred?
I do remember, what I remember mostly was the feeling of what happens now? It's like the bridge is gone. Again, the history is gone, the city is gone. How are we going to cross over? Like, this was the symbol of the city in Mostar, the old bridge. So for me, it was like somebody just takes the heart out of that city and just crumbles it, and it's gone. That's what that historical places mean, including the library, including the old bridge, or any other historical sites that people are pointing at. So yeah, it's very heartbreaking to watch it.
Yeah. Doug or Amila, are there specific stories or moments in your work that illustrate why preserving these memories is so important and vital?
I remember taking a group of Bosnian students and some organizers back to Bosnia in 1996, right after the end of the war. And one of the things that we visited was the Sarajevo Library. And I don't know if you can share the picture of that, Patrick, but it was probably one of the most significant photos I think I've ever taken. We were in the library kind of looking at all of the destruction, and I climbed up to the second floor to kind of look around, and I looked down and I took this picture. And it was only after I came home and developed the print in my darkroom that I realized that the three people that are in that photograph are all of whom were working in the Bosnian Student Project. One was a Bosnian Student Project student who was Muslim. One was a World University Service organizer from Croatia who was Croat. And then the World University Service organizer in Sarajevo was a Muslim who was married to a Croat. And here it was, we were standing in the ruins of a library that was destroyed specifically to try to let the Bosnian people know that there was no multicultural identity. And here were three people of the major ethnicities of Bosnia who were standing together, and all of whom had worked together to try to rescue 160 Bosnian students, bring them out of the war zone and into American homes and colleges and universities. It was the antithesis of what the Serbs were trying to do, and the proof that the human spirit can overcome the forces that are trying to divide us. The Bosnian Student Project could not have happened had we not had the collaboration of Bosnians, Bosniaks, Croats, and Muslims in the former Yugoslavia, helping us to identify students, get them out of the war zone, and get them into American schools. And then in the United States, the project could not have been successful had we not had the collaboration of Christians, Muslims, and Jews who were willing to take these students who could no longer study in their own countries into their homes and into the universities to help them to finish the education that had been prohibited by that genocidal war. So that's for me, that's probably the most significant photograph I've ever taken.
Yeah, thank you. It almost seems inconceivable to me now to think about trying to mount a similar effort. Amila, any personal reflections, or is there a particular moment that stands out in your memory?
Thousands of them, I would say. You know, clearly to me, this runs extremely personally and very deep, because it marks, you know, the end of, in some ways, the end of my life as I knew it, with the loss of my sister, and with a sense that her courage and her resilience, you know, in some ways, it wasn't, whatever the contribution was, and it's very hard to measure that. I don't know, and we don't really know, you know, how her personal sacrifice played out, whether, you know, whether she managed to save the books, any of the books, or not. I mean, that's something that is impossible to I can only imagine. I try to imagine, of course, in the most positive light, the outcome of that effort and that sacrifice. But it also brings up a really sort of bitter line in me, in the sense that I don't want to say bitter, but pessimistic. I should say pessimistic. I mean, there is a sense that at some level they have won the war. The Serbs have managed to win in one thing, and that is that after the war was over, the restoration and recovery of Bosnian heritage has been rather lacking. The library has been refurbished and rebuilt, and it looks beautiful, but it is no longer the library. It has been taken away from those who used it in the past and those who might be able to use it in the future. A similar thing has happened with the National Museum, where I do my work, where there is constantly a fine line between will they survive in the light of post-war division of cultural heritage, divisiveness, and this sense that really the war did the damage, but the post-war has also been doing some damage. So the efforts that people like Doug and you, Patrick, and everybody else in this project are so important, because it almost as if, you know, so many of us are running against now, and fighting against too many forces that are just indifferent towards the past that had happened. And I sometimes, you know, ask, I don't know whether it's the sign of the age, but I wonder, I don't think that my sister went into the, you know, into she was working at the library, and every day she went to the library as part of her work ethics and work, you know, schedule. But I don't think that, you know, she conceived of herself as a hero. She didn't think of herself as somebody who would say, you know, if this were to happen, I will go and, you know, take the banner and go and fight the enemy, as it were. But her instinct to preserve cultural heritage, to preserve the books, prevailed and took over, and she was willing to go that step out of the way to, in fact, to try to do her best. And I wonder that about now, you know, who would be willing to do that? I mean, I don't know, would I be willing to do that? I ask my students, would you be willing to save the books from burning flames if it were your library that is burning? Is this something that would be worth fighting for, that would be worth, and that is something that I sort of live with, I must say, on a kind of very personal, it is a very sort of intimate, this dilemma and fear in me that, you know, the generation that was lost during that war is in some ways no longer with us. I mean, that kind of mindset is no longer with us. I hope that I'm very wrong, but I do think that that's why it is extremely important that we join forces around, you know, the world, or you know, in this part of the, or wherever, I mean, where we actually connect and keep talking about these events, keep understanding how important they are, and keep creating this intimate link between what happened and what happens in our lives. Because I think if we lose that connection, we also lose, you know, we risk losing our memories. I mean, who are we giving our memories to for future generations? Who is inheriting our knowledge, our memories to you know, to be there for us once we are gone, when we are gone, when you know, either because of time or because of some other war or something. So sorry for this kind of convoluted answer, but I think that you know, you can see how I'm so much on the edge, always wondering, you know, is this something? How loudly does one need to speak to make a point that we cannot slip, we cannot let this kind of cultural heritage slip just because we don't, you know, the times have changed.
I think you're right. I think that impulse to save culture, even at great personal risk, came out of a specific context and a shared life and a way of being in the world and thinking about the world, so that when that attack came for your sister, it was a natural impulse. It wasn't something that she had to really think about. It was a connection to a shared past, and therefore a sense of it being an attack against the culture that produced that way of life.
Yeah.
As you all well know, Bosnia and Herzegovina remains politically divided, and there are different narratives about what happened during the war. How do you, each of you, navigate that contested memory and that landscape of memory in your work?
Well, for
Happy.
me,
Okay, yes, go ahead. Yes, please.
no, I mean, for me, I was just thinking about it like, you know, what is history? You know, who writes the history? So it depends what side writes the history. So, you know, 3 sides, 3 histories. So, you know, just an example of a very good childhood friend that I stayed in touch, that lived in Belgrade, still lives in Belgrade. a Serbian lady. So we were in touch for so long, so many years. We were friends in middle school, then stayed in touch, and we were still in touch. But then during the conversations that we're having, especially during the war and then after the war, it was also when I would say, well, what happened? She would say, that's not right. That's not, because this is what we know what happened there. So there's no point of proving anything. The facts are there, but the thing is that each side will write their own history. And that's what the children will learn when they come to the school. And that's the whole problem of reading and learning the history of one side only. So I think for me, that is the biggest issue, is not knowing the actual truth or not learning about the actual truth. And that's why you have to be wide open and read all sides and kind of make your own conclusion.
I think you're right, and you grew up in a culture at a time when Bosnians of all background had normal, natural interaction with each other. Now, in some places, even in Mostar, there's two systems, two schools under one roof, where Muslim students go and then Catholic students go. And there's a division, a formal physical division that keeps people separate, that keeps people from having an experience of life that to me always seemed very against the ethos of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I always say it's very unnatural for Bosnians to live apart, because there is no Bosnia and Herzegovina that doesn't include everyone. Doug or Amila, any reflections on that question about navigating the contested landscape of memory?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Sorry, Doug, were you?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is something that, again, it's almost a sort of daily rumination on my part. I teach a course which is entitled Sacred Space in Religious Traditions here at York. And one thing that I have learned over the years teaching this course and reading about it, is something that has sort of pushed me away a little bit from the reaction and desire that I had in the past that we should reunite the Bosnian memory as a singular kind of memory of the place, and that we should get rid of those voices that contest that question that. And what I've learned is that space always accommodates multiple things. It's simultaneous. There are many memories living on the same space at the same time everywhere. In Canada, we do land acknowledgement every time we do a public speech, and it's a way of saying, yeah, we have taken away this land and you have your memory of this land, whereas we have now a memory of the land, but they are simply coexisting now. They're there. And when one looks at space, culturally speaking, it always has these contestations, sometimes coexistence, sometimes overlaps, and so on and so forth. And what I think is that in Bosnia, it seems to me, yes, that I agree with Lejla that we need to have a sort of, the history lessons properly taught, but at the same time, acknowledge that we have Bosnia that has now been, that has divisive memories enshrined in its political system. The Dayton Agreement has basically asked us to remember different things and to be culturally separated. And so it is not so much about then fighting what had happened then, but rather what is going on now. So how do we get away from that? And I think that one of the most important things is that, of course, the Balkans in general and Bosnia, are always accused of having too much history in everyday life. Like everybody is constantly referring to some historical events, some historical myth, and so on and so forth. But I think that we need to make sure that we learn a new way of being different in the same place, that we don't need to constantly say, oh, we are identical. Let's acknowledge these differences. Let's acknowledge diversity in a way that is somewhat different from the way in which we used to talk about it. And let's acknowledge that it's precisely that diversity that created Bosnia as it is, that in fact, in the past, there were always these differences that were not really official narrative. The official narrative was one that tried to supersede the different memories and in communal, different communities. But I think that we need to look at these differences now as the asset rather than as a problem. And if we turn that into an asset, that we will actually have a better chance to detach those memories and that collective memory from the trauma that is plaguing Bosnia for such a long time. And that we, in fact, can learn a new way of being together amidst these differences and say, fine, remember whatever you want to remember. But let's from now on acknowledge that difference doesn't have to be a way of not talking to each other, but precisely to be a way of trying to find the middle ground, trying to be together in the space in a different way. Somewhat similar to what happened in Rwanda. Rwanda has done a much better job, I think, than Bosnia has when it came to acknowledging these different factions and these different ways of being. And I think that we need to think of those multiple memories as part of our joint cultural heritage, and then do something with it, move forward with it in a way that would make sure that the history did not repeat itself, and that would give some way of healing the trauma from collectively, from the Bosnians, whoever ethnically, religiously, socioeconomically, gender orientation they are. Because I think that, we are stuck in the kind of ethno-national discourse, whereas in fact difference can be expressed in so many different other ways, and that we need to bring that into the conversation, foreground it in the conversation, so that people can be whatever they want to be, yet still share in the same space and same heritage.
Yeah, that it no longer be the basis of division, but of thinking about a common future and a common life that acknowledges and respects those differences, but doesn't see them as the basis for keeping people separate. Doug?
Yes, exactly.
What did you want to add, Doug?
Well, the Bosnian Student Project was an amazing experience in that we encouraged university communities to put together interfaith support networks. And then we put students in homes without regard to religious or ethnic backgrounds. And it was essentially, we told anyone who wanted to participate in the project that they had to be willing to accept the students as they were. You could welcome them to come to your church or synagogue or mosque. You couldn't force them. If they wanted to go to a mosque, you had to help them go to a mosque. You had to welcome them as an individual and accept them as an individual. And it was an amazing experience. We're often told that, Jews and Muslims are antithetical to each other and everything. We had two Bosnian Muslim students who were put in Jewish rabbi homes. Both of them were incredible experiences of bonding and really uniting with each other. I remember a Bosnian Muslim student in, she was a high school student in North Carolina, I believe. And the word had come to the Jewish family that had hosted her that her father had just been killed in Serbia, in Sarajevo by Serb artillery. And the Jewish family called me and said, how can you help us? How can we help this Muslim student to mourn for her father, who was actually killed by a Christian Serb? And I used, because we were working with the Tosin Barak and the Jarahi Order of America, he was quickly able to find a Muslim imam who could come and work with this Jewish family to help this Muslim student to mourn for her father. And it was just an incredible experience, an incredible learning experience for both of them. There were so many of those kind of stories that came out of that experience. And I think having people get to know each other as human beings across the ethnic and religious lines really changes people in a very profound way if you approach it in an open way. And that's, we always insisted that, you know, there could be no attempt at converting anybody to any direction. You had to welcome them as humans and affirm them in their own way. I'll tell one other story. We had one of the students from Tuzla had actually been in a refugee camp for a couple of years before we discovered her and brought her to Ohio to one of the colleges that had offered a scholarship. And I had been told by the World University Service that she'd been pretty traumatized and had been living in a refugee camp for a while. And so I knew a Baptist pastor in the city that her college was, and I contacted him and I said, you know, this young woman has been through a really rough time. Maybe you could reach out to her and try to welcome her into this community. And he said, sure, he'd love to do that. And so I contacted him a few months later and I said, how's it going? And he said, well, you know, this has been an amazing experience. We have welcomed this Bosnian Muslim young woman to be a member of the First Baptist Church in our city. And when we do our worship services, there's always a period of time for prayer, and we ask her to tell us about what's happening to her family in Tuzla and what things she's hearing from friends, and to help us to pray more usefully about the situation there. And then I got in touch with the student, and she wrote me this beautiful letter, and she said, did you know that Muslims and Baptists worship the same God? She said, this church has been just like my mosque back in Tuzla. They have welcomed me and have become a part of my family. So I think these kind of affirmative personal relationships across those prohibited lines do an incredible amount in breaking down the stereotypes and the hostilities that we have often put up in those ways.
And I think it speaks very highly, Doug, of both your influence on the project and that of Sheikh Bayrak, Tosin Bayrak, who has passed away. Just as a side note, he wrote a beautiful book, autobiography called Memoirs of a Moth. It's a little bit hard to track down, but if you have access to a library, you should be able to get it. A really, really fascinating life. And I would invite you to learn more about him. As we close out this part of the program, I just wanted to, and we'll open it up to others' questions and comments and ideas, but I wanted to ask, to move it a little bit out of the Bosnian experience and thinking about what happened in Bosnia and Herzegovina, what does it offer to other places and to other people who are facing similar struggles or are working to preserve memory of their cultures under attack? Anyone want to start out with reflections on that?
Well, I have a very good Palestinian friend who lives in Gaza who texts me almost every day in the last couple of years about his situation there. And it has been interesting to me that the Israeli forces have very intentionally destroyed every Gazan university and library. And the intentionality in which they have gone about to destroy cultural memory has been very, very, it's reminiscent of what I saw in Bosnia, where the Serbs in the areas that they took over tried to destroy and evaporate the mosques and libraries and other things that were in those areas to really destroy the cultural memory, to try to destroy the people. So I know that that is really important to the people of Gaza now as they are trying to recover and rebuild their society, which has been largely completely denuded of all of its cultural artifacts.
Yeah.
You want to add to that, Amila?
Yes, absolutely. I would I completely agree with Doug that this is it's almost unprecedented in the way in which it is so visible to us day to day how it is being destroyed. I mean, even Bosnia, which was in a way the first instance of this kind of destruction of heritage being recorded almost in real time, that Gaza is even more so, and it's more violently so in such a shorter period of time. So much destruction. I would add to this the importance of, in addition to importance, of course, of projects such as bringing students together and bringing people, saving people's lives, is in a way working with them to understand that what happens after the destruction can be equally equal, if not equally in terms of the, of course, the scale of it, but can be also very problematic and can be taken out of their hands. And this is what I sometimes, call kind of Act 2 in the destruction of heritage. That when you try, again, going back to who do you give permission to rebuild your cultural heritage, to rebuild your institutions? Who do you employ, consult, bring over to, in fact, work with you to preserve and restore and rebuild what has been destroyed? And I think in Bosnia, we've had a couple of rather unpleasant situations where, for example, the Gazri Husrev Bey's mosque in Sarajevo, which used to be one of the most beautiful, beautifully decorated mosques, after it was destroyed, the Saudi government decided they gave money for the restoration, but it restored it in the Saudi style. So it didn't restore it in the Bosnian style, it restored it in the Saudi style. And there were actually even protests against that organized by the local Muslims in Sarajevo, and thankfully they prevailed so that some of that has been returned. So the mosque doesn't look completely whitewashed the way that, but rather has this sort of floral still and decorative color to it. So I mentioned earlier, the National Library no longer, the building is there, but it is not the library. The National Museum being somehow falling through the cracks of bureaucracy as to who owns it. In other words, the processes of reconstruction that in fact can take us into a direction that history did not record. So kind of creation of new history out of the same buildings, out of the same cultural monuments and landmarks. So I think that that's something that one needs to be really aware of, and I have had a chance to speak with some Ukrainian and as well as Palestinian colleagues who and in a way caution them precisely to be very mindful as to who they entrust their cultural heritage to, because people really don't have the money to do it by themselves, so they need help. But who is that help is really important.
Yeah, great point. Lejla, anything to add?
Well, just listening to Doug and to Amila, I'm just thinking about how everything started, and me being as a Bosnian Student Project student who had the honor to come through Doug and Tosun Bayrak. For me, just reflecting on everything, I'm just realizing for the past few years, I have to realize how big this project was and how many people actually made this happen. When I came, I was only 21. What did I think of all of that? There are just some people, helping us, but now, when you're 21, you're going to school and you're all over the place. Now, when you think back, you're thinking like, none of these people had to do what they did. They chose to do this. They chose to find schools. They chose to find host families. They chose to, get us immigration papers ready. They found money for travel tickets, for airline tickets. Now, when I look back and I think of everything that has Doug and Tosun and all the people involved, all those wonderful, great people, including you, Patrick, what you've done for me and my family, I mean, I just can't even comprehend what it took to all of you to actually do that for someone. I'm just now realizing how important the project was, and I am committed to making it live. And I'm committed to making my fellow students join hands and do something more important things, more important project, and help other students in need. So I just don't want this to end. And that's why I was so honored to be here and to listen to all your stories and to get inspired more and more. Every time I hear Doug speak, in my head, there's more ideas. Okay, we have to do that, we have to do that. So I'm really glad we're doing those gallery talks so we can continue actions to do this world a better place.
I agree. What a beautiful note to end this part of the program on. And then we'll open it up to either friends who are online or friends who are here in the gallery for any questions or comments that you have. Colleen, did you have something? You're unmuted. You could mute her. I'm not sure she's aware. Anyone want to get us started? Who's here? Elvidine Pasic, yeah.
Great. I really appreciate this. Is amazing. Sorry for being late. I think we struggled a little bit with parking, but Doug, Amila, Lejla, Patrick, awesome. I'm going to go back to what Amila was saying. Is it Amila? I'm sorry, or Amila?
Amila.
Amila.
Yes, Amila, yes.
Okay. I'm going to go back to what you said about rebuilding and let's summarize a little bit about making sure that we're kind of moving and kind of in a way that forget about it, but yet move on. I'm a little bit stuck on there because I believe that influence of Serbia and Croatia personally as a country, their leadership is a huge influence that we're dealing with both Bosnians within, Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs within Bosnia. If to add to what you said, yes, I completely agree. From being there, living there, and going through all this stuff, just like most of us did. The influence from outside, invading accords and all that, I firmly believe that the heavy influence of Croatia and Serbian leadership is playing a huge role, where you still have this dysfunctional government and division amongst the people. It's really hard, because I was going through the school, actually I was in high school during that time, and experienced some of that, including my Croats and Serbs friends during 1993, 1994 in the classroom, when we are bombed, at the same time sitting in the classroom and bombed and shelled by Serb forces. But you're turning at the same time, looking at the Serb and saying, okay, these are your people doing it. And then, at the same time, Zenica is getting bombarded by Croatian forces from Vitez. So we're sitting there and we're looking at each other, we're being attacked as if we are collectively in a classroom, innocent, but yet the influence, I believe, is still strongly present from Croatia and Serbia leadership team, which is creating this dysfunctional and still division, where you cannot, as a person, and I go there now and I see that it still coexist, but its influence is coming from Serbia and Croatia. Until then, or until something happens where you do not have influence from them, which we know, why is this happening? Why is it paralyzing Bosnia as it is? Then you will not have this unity that we're hoping and praying for, that we can move on and preserve what's valuable to all of us that we know. Because living there and going through school, I had no idea that we had king. Bosnia had a king. I had no idea until I came to the States. I was 18 years old. What do you mean I had no king? Because it was washed out. I was brainwashed completely. I had no idea that we had a king, because I was learning something totally different. So I'll just leave it at that. I believe that strongly with influence from Serbia and Croatia, their leadership, which is putting seeds inside Bosnia leadership team to keep this division, because for whatever reason, it seems like that's more than what we wanted. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. And were you able to hear online, Doug and Amila, were you able to get the?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know whether, just as a response, quick response, I mean, you are absolutely right. And this is partly what the Dayton was about. It was about saying these are the three constituent peoples, rather than saying this is one country that contains that is comprised of, as a civil society, that is comprised of different types of ethnicities and religions and all of that. I mean, I don't think that to be honest, Amir, I don't think that our model should be either Croatia or Serbia, even though we are pushed in that direction. We are constantly pushed in the direction of consulting the neighbors as if somehow they know the solution for Bosnia. And this is really very unfortunate. I completely agree with you. I think that it is that has set Bosnia on a completely wrong track. But we are the ones, we have, individually, we have to choose our battles. And I think that we are able to, at least if we can make a bit of an indent in the way in which people think around us, in the realm of work that we do, I think we could make step-by-step significant differences. Because you are absolutely right. None of this would be happening if Serbia and Croatia didn't have somehow a claim that that they are for everything that happens in Bosnia. They need to be a lid, as they say. Svakom loncu poklopac. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've seen the continuation of the wartime project for both the government of Serbia and Croatia in very systematically undermining the viability, the prosperity, the security of the Bosnian state. And it is, in my view, a continuation of the war aims that those two
Yes.
countries had. in
Can
their-
I add something very personal on this, which is,
Sure.
I mean, it's personal, but it's not, it's also very political. So there has been a recent news about sniper tourism in you must have been reading everybody's, you know, it really it has become now public knowledge that there was this horrible thing called sniper tourism, where people would wake up in the comfort of their homes, wherever they are, in Italy, in Germany, in Canada, wherever they are, and then decide, okay, so today I'm going to kill some Sarajevans. So they go and pay money to the Serbian forces and shoot with the snipers. Well, it happens so that Aleksandar Vučić, the president of Serbia, has now been implicated in this. And we know that he had already been, that had been known to the media and to the political realms for quite a while now, that he was involved in sniper tourism. And here is my very personal thing. He was operating from the Jewish cemetery in the summer of 1993. My dad was killed in July of 1993 by a sniper from a Jewish cemetery. So for all I know, he may have been killed by Aleksandar Vučić, who is now the president of Serbia. So I take it very personally that Vučić needs to be brought to justice, whether that is, you know, writing a petition to bring him to be internationally sanctioned, to have this kind of important intervention in international relations, where Vučić, who's anyway been on, you know, protested against within Serbia, we know, by millions of people for the past year, and still holding, you know, in his seat, that things like that need to be galvanized, so that people like that are taken out of their post, and possibly, hopefully, that may influence the way in which politics are run in the regional way.
Yeah, and held responsible for their actions. You know, I'm very happy that the Italian government has opened an official
Yes.
investigation into it. Even these crimes that occurred 30 years ago, they are still relevant, still important. And I should say our first questioner, Alvin Pasic, was the first witness at the genocide trial of Ratko Mladic, who was successfully prosecuted and held accountable for the crimes against humanity and genocide that occurred in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Alvin is a real hero and inspiration to many of us here in St. Louis. Are there other questions? Caitlin, go ahead.
I thank everyone again for the wonderful panel. I work as a librarian and an archivist, and I have to say it's always fascinating to hear people's firsthand experience. Something that I think we're really getting at in the panel tonight is how political and how important memory and education are, and how important libraries, museums, cultural institutions are in creating cultural memory. So I'm delighted that we're here in our Museum of Art on campus. Something that I'm reflecting on, listening to everyone speak, is in North America, primarily from white organizations and white universities, archivists are now trained to think about, be very suspicious of records, and to think about records as being biased, and to look very deeply at them. But what I'm realizing, listening to you speaking tonight, is how privileged that position is, because it privileges the idea, it works in the assumption that there are living records that you can be suspicious of. And so just in reflecting on how we move forward in a society, in a world where there are many, historically and now, people's memories and cultural memories that are being destroyed, how do we move forward with the history and the records that we're creating now? The record of tonight, the record of what members of the Bosnian American community are doing here in St. Louis. How do we record them and use them in a way that is beneficial now and in the future.
I mean, maybe I can start. I think those become the source material that people will look to in the future to try to understand what happened during this period. And I'm so gratified that the Center for Bosnian Studies is here at St. Louis University, and that the team that runs the center has conducted so many oral histories. You know, you can deny in the larger sense the reality of genocide in a place like Bosnia and Herzegovina, but you can't refute the personal experiences that have been captured by, let's say, people from Prijedor. When we did a systematic effort to look at the crimes that were committed early in the war in Prijedor, and we had, through the help of various translators and interpreters, we interviewed those people that had lived through the early period of the war, many of whom were survivors of a network of concentration camps in and around Prijedor. A lot of those people have now passed away, and it's so important that we capture and preserve those memories, and to do it in a way that is systematic and responsible. And so I think we're setting as an example the work that we're doing here at SLU through the Center for Bosnian Studies. I don't know if others on the panel have thoughts on that, reflections on that.
Yeah, I think this is, if I can just add, this is really such a pressing issue. And thank you for raising this in the context that is now directly connected with, you know, with our day and age and our, I mean, not as much in Canada as it is in the same way in the US, but nevertheless, I think we share this sort of fear about what happens next. And I would just like to add to what Patrick has said, you know, in this effort of systematically preserving memory and heritage, I want to evoke what Cornelius Holter suggests, and that is, you know, we shouldn't focus on what cultural heritage is, but rather what it does. So sort of rather than trying to define it, we want to see what it does to us as a culture, and what it does to us as we project ourselves in the future. So it's a kind of Janus faced. It's both about the past, but how we carry it in the future and what it will do in the future for the generations who have it. So understanding really how the preservation of heritage is not just about amassing everything, but rather understanding that we need to project it in the future in a way that will make it meaningful beyond this day and age.
Right, that it contributes something to the future and to the project of the future.
Yeah.
Do we have friends online that wanted to ask any questions or offer? Okay, Wales, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Wales Brown. Very brief introduction. I'm a language teacher and translator. I taught Bosnian, Croatian, and Serbian language courses at Cornell for several decades. And I studied in the former Yugoslavia back when it was still Yugoslavia. One comment and a bit longer, and one very brief one. In the film, we see Andras Riedelmeier, but the film doesn't really show who he was, who he is, and what he was doing. He was the curator of Islamic art at Harvard, and he was an activist in preservation of cultural heritage, not just art, but after the destruction of the library, which we saw, he started the In-Gathering Project, which meant that every scholar who had used material from that library and made photographs, Xerox copies. And anyone who had material from that library should be sure and share a copy with Sarajevo so that some at least of the lost material would be available again in Sarajevo. And I think librarians ought to appreciate this, but so should scholars of all kinds, and even people who are not historians or linguists and would not have been reading ancient documents themselves. They ought to be glad that some of them have been saved. So Andras Riedelmeier is not a Bosnian, he's a Hungarian American, but an expert in Islamic art and manuscripts as well. And then the brief comment is, Bosnia, after the war, developed a skill that no one would ever have wanted to have before the war. It was the skill of going through mass graves and using DNA analysis to identify the mixed up bodies. And after developing this skill, Bosnians were able to help Guatemalans and other Central Americans who had also been subjected to large-scale massacres and burials. So Bosnia is now in the forefront. As I say, they would never have wanted to be, but now they are the forefront of identifying victims of mass killings. And we should give them due credit for that.
Yeah, Lejla and I worked when the ICMP came to St. Louis, the International Commission on Missing Persons, to take blood samples from Bosnians here to help identify the human remains that had been unearthed. And they were doing and are doing just incredible work. And our colleague from the Red Cross, who has since passed away, but was a great friend and participant in that project. We probably have time for one last question or comment. Do we have someone here or online that would like to ask a question?
I could just say, in relation to the last comment, actually, one of our Bosnian student projects, students who was educated at Sarah Lawrence and Northwestern University, went back to Tuzla and was very involved in that identification of the victims of in the mass graves. And I was able to visit her there, go through the workshop, the warehouses that she was working in, and learn about the amazing work she was doing.
Yeah, and I think, it sounds strange to say in the context of that work, but it is something that gives people some closure about their loved ones. The idea that you would just have a close relative who was just lost and no evidence of their physical remains is an open wound that continues for many people, including people in the room tonight. I want to end on a more hopeful note, and I would just invite those who are here with us tonight and in other ways that we can share it with our virtual audience, the work of the Bosnian Student Project, which is exhibited in the gallery space that is outside and to the left. So I would invite you to take a few minutes to go through that. Then we're going to go up to the second floor where we have some light refreshments and enjoy some time together. This has been a really tremendous and insightful and enlightening program. And I'm so grateful and appreciative to our panelists, and I would ask just for a round of applause for the three of them. And thank you for those of us who joined us virtually. If you know of friends who weren't able to join us, we did record the program and we'll make that available as soon as we can. Thank you again for coming, and thank you for those who are here and those who are online. Have a good evening.
Thank you so very much. This has really been such a wonderful reunion, as it were, and I'm very, very grateful for your ongoing efforts to talk about Bosnia and keep the memory alive.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you.